Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas, and this week on The Stacks, we're doing something a little different. In light of the recent wave of book bannings all across America, I felt it was really important to spotlight what's going on. I have been really upset over everything I'm reading and hearing about, and so I wanted to take the time to address it on the podcast. Every single day this week, Monday through Friday, I'm talking to different people impacted by book bannings. My guests will range from educators and students to booksellers, politicians, and authors. Things have been moving really quickly in the book banning arena, and in an effort to be timely with our coverage of book bannings, we put together this whole mini series in about a week. These 5 days of coverage is not comprehensive, but instead a way to highlight more voices and to remind us all what is at stake. Throughout the week, you'll also hear from some of my favorite authors and thinkers about their favorite banned books. Everything we talk about on today's episode can be found in the link in the show notes. I also want to say, if you like what you hear, if you appreciate the work that I'm doing to create The Stacks every single week, please join the Stacks Pack on Patreon. The Stacks is a completely independent podcast, so without the support of listeners like you, there really is no show. You will get perks like our virtual book club and bonus episodes, and also you'll get to rest easy knowing your contribution makes The Stacks possible. So to join us, head to patreon.com/thestacks. All right, now let's get to today's episode all about the banning of books. All right, everybody, it is another day of the banned book week here at The Stacks. I'm very excited. I am joined today by author and graphic novelist Alison Bechdel. She's the author of Fun Home, which many of you, I'm sure, have heard of, award-winning, New York Times bestselling, as well as her follow-up, Are You My Mother? Alison, welcome to The Stacks.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much.
I'm very excited to have you. I mentioned this to you offline as a book lover and a theater lover, getting to talk to someone who has a fantastic book and a fantastic musical connected to that book. This is just a major moment for me personally. So thank you so much for being here. The focus of today is banned books, as you know, and we'll just sort of dive in and see what we come up with. Do you remember the first time you found out one of your books or your book Fun Home was being challenged or banned somewhere?
You know, there's been so many times that, no, I don't remember that first time anymore. They're all sort of blurring together, but especially lately, there's been such a flurry.
Yeah, what do you make of this most recent wave of book banning going on?
God, I can only assume this is just part of the general politically insane atmosphere that we're all living in. But it's disturbing, you know? I mean, didn't everyone get taught how bad it is to ban books? Like, this is the first step to fascism. These people must have missed that day of school. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe that book was banned from their library.
Right.
Fahrenheit 451 or whatever.
Yes. It's just crazy.
It really is. The thing that I find so interesting, especially like when I think about your book, Fun Home, and I think about, you know, one of the major arguments I've been hearing in this recent wave of banning is like, it's going to make the children uncomfortable, right? Like it's going to be hard for them. They're going to feel bad about themselves for whatever reason. And I just think like your book is a memoir about your childhood, you know? So you experienced a lot of what happens in your book as a child. Some of it is in your early adulthood, but it is your life. It is your story. These are the things that happen to you in real life, IRL, as the kids say. So I'm wondering, what do you say back to that? What do you say back to people that say, well, this story will make children uncomfortable?
I mean, there's so many layers to this.
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, the really upsetting thing is when people call my book obscene, because,
right,
you know, it's the equivalent of saying that my life, my very existence is obscene. And I think that's what happens with a lot of work with queer authors and people of color. Like, their very perspective is being deemed bad. So that's obviously very dangerous. But in terms of children having a hard time with things, people who really care about children understand that you need to be brave enough to talk about reality with them and prepare them for these difficult things, you know?
Right.
That's so basic, trying to shield children or protect children out of some notion that children are innocent, I think is one of the most dangerous beliefs people can have, because it absolutely ensures that these bad things are going to keep happening because no one's teaching children how to deal with them.
Right.
I just have to tell a funny story
Yeah.
to illustrate this case. One place where my book was challenged or banned, at least temporarily, recently was in Kansas City. And I just saw this crazy picture of this gang of guys holding up these blown up images from my book at this school board meeting, like the 2 pages of the 240-page book that have naked people having sex on them. And that's not the punchline. The punchline is that one of these guys at the school board meeting was just arrested for molesting children.
Oh, I saw this headline. Yeah.
Like, I can't even explain it.
Right. I get it. It's like you don't want children to have access to these books because they're obscene, as they would say. And yet here you are committing crimes because you've not reckoned with what's going on within you, which is sort of, a theme in your own book, right? Like that's sort of one of the big things about your book. And like one of the questions I have for you around that is like, in your story, your father was closeted for his entire life, and you came out a few months before his suicide. I hope this isn't a spoiler. It's in like the first 10 pages of the books, people. So, sorry. But I wonder, like, I don't know. I hate to distill your life into lessons, but it's just there's like some sort of symmetry to me about people not wanting children to learn about and talk about and think about other people's lives that either could be potentially connected to their own or completely different from their experiences. And you've lived this life where there were so many secrets and there was so much like dancing around issues and talking about literature in place of talking about what was really going on. And I don't know what the question is, but I just wonder, do you feel like there's something that like you wish you could shake into these people and be like, look, I lived a life where this book probably, a world in which we weren't talking about the things that are in my book and what you've sort of gleaned from that?
No, I mean, that is a very fair summation of the book and actually for me of my whole like path of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in this house that had a lot of secrets and had a lot of, ways that things didn't look the way they really were. And it left me kind of alienated from myself on a deep level, which, throughout my life, I've been integrating back and becoming whole and understanding that, secrets are incredibly destructive. And in my case, literally destructive, leading to my father's suicide. So I feel pretty passionate about just telling people the truth. I know it's very difficult. I know it's painful. I know it's scary, but everyone is better off in the end.
Yeah. That's just such the irony of your specific book. I feel like in this moment is like reading the book, you can't help but see when we don't talk about these things, when we don't reckon with these things, it ends up being, worse for everybody. It ends up, in this case, a suicide, but you went through other, obsessive compulsions. Like there were things that you were experiencing as a child because of the secrets and because of all of this. And it just is, I can't help but when I think about your book to think about your book being banned, to think about how what's in the book would be really helpful. Like this is exactly why the book, exists. And sort of to that point, a lot of what I hear when people talk about books from the LGBTQIA plus community, it's like, this is to learn or to teach, and kids need these books so that they can understand. But one of the things that I always push back with as a Black woman is like, also these stories need to exist because these people exist, like these lives have existed.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear you kind of talk about why, your work isn't necessarily, of course people can learn, right, from books. Not to diminish that part of it, but sort of to speak to like why your book should just exist just on the merits of it being a book,
I think you just said that more eloquently than I possibly could. That was very beautifully put. But yeah, I'm just writing about my own life, my own story. I guess memoirs are in their own special category in terms of these challenges and bannings because they're real. This is real. These are real people's lives. What right do you have to say that they're wrong or bad or obscene?
Yeah, I just saw this great thread on Twitter. Someone was talking about Maus, and they were talking about how, schools are suggesting that instead of teaching that book, that they'll teach a fictionalized version of, a Holocaust story. And they kind of unpacked all that meant, which was like the stories end up going from being these first person narratives to becoming where we are supposed to sympathize with the oppressor. Like the comparison they used was the boy in the striped pajamas, which I've never read, but I guess it's like from the perspective of a German boy who meets a child who's in a camp, and it becomes about sympathizing with that boy and like that taking making it more accessible or more comfortable means that you're taking out the first person narrative, you're taking out the truth of the story, and you're creating this other version of it where, things happen, but it's not done by someone, right? Like people were killed in Auschwitz, but it wasn't by Nazis necessarily. It just was this terrible thing that happened to this boy character that we're supposed to feel sorry for. And I think that's like, always really upsetting, and which is one of the reasons I love memoir in general. Like we don't always need a fictionalized story. People have lived these lives.
Right.
You also write, graphic work, and I'm wondering if you have any sense of like it being a more targeted, or feeling like it's like an easier target because there's some argument being made that it's a picture book, or I know people really shit on graphic books like inappropriately.
Graphic stories get a lot more scrutiny just because, well, for one thing, they're assumed to be written for children. And I must say, I had no idea like high school kids were going to be reading Fun Home. It never occurred to me to write that for like a younger audience.
Right.
Nor did Art Spiegelman write Maus for 13-year-olds,
Right.
Which is not to say they shouldn't be taught to kids. I think those are both very legitimate curriculum choices. But yeah, the thing about having pictures is they're right there. You might be able to put a sex scene in prose and nobody really notices it, or it doesn't somehow seem as shocking. But when you're seeing pictures, it's a little different. I'm not sure. I don't have any like wise statement about how comics should be handled.
That's okay. You don't have to know.
Sorry. Tracy, I'm like, I have to say one thing that maybe my biggest resentment about all of this book banning is the responsibility I then have to like come talk about it. And I'm not super, I have other things I would rather be doing, so, and I don't have a clearly articulated platform about all of this. It's upsetting, it's annoying, it's disturbing. That's all.
You make such a good point. I feel like that's often the point that people make about like racism, right? Is like, it distracts us from doing the other work that we have set out to do, and I think that, it's such a good point. And I feel like that's part of, my frustration as a reader and a lover of books is like all of this banning bullshit is taking away from like the reading, the good stuff, like, and the discussing and the unpacking and the thinking about, because I think there certainly is a conversation to be had about young people reading a book that deals with the topics in your book, and who is teaching these classes and who is helping them understand it, and not they shouldn't have access to it because it's difficult or uncomfortable. And I think like I'd much rather have those conversations, right? About like, how do we handle memoir when we're as adults and as young people, quite frankly.
I just want to say I'm so grateful to the teachers and the librarians who are fighting to keep these books in the library, on the curriculum. They are very brave people.
They are. And they're so passionate. It's like, there's no question. I spoke to a librarian yesterday, which folks will have probably heard by now, that conversation. But Katrina kept saying like, no, the books need to be here because it's for the community. If everyone in the community came together and said, take it out, then maybe we would take it out of our library. But until that point, it's not, there's no question about whether these books should or shouldn't exist. So, who knows? I'm curious if all of the banning stuff changes how you do your work, how you think about your work, how you write, how you create. If it's like lingers or if it's something that you are just like, this is a total distraction. I never think about it ever again.
I don't really think about it as I'm working, I'm happy to say. But, it's also sometimes surprising or jarring to me to find that, a high school class is reading Fun Home, or even my comic strip Dykes to Watch Out For. Sometimes younger people are reading that. Actually, I was sort of surprised to realize recently that it was the children of many lesbians who had bought my Dykes to Watch Out For comics who were reading those things, who kind of grew up reading my comics, which is funny to me because I certainly never in a million years imagined children reading those things. I mean, they're full of swear words and sex scenes and all kinds of stuff. But I think that's funny because I've met some of these young people and they're very well adjusted.
Right.
So I'm glad that happened. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I come from a generation, I'm old enough, I'm 61. I remember when gay people had to be very careful about being around children or being in the context of a school or an educational setting. Like you could very easily get charged with, being a child molester.
Right.
It's disturbing to see that tide kind of creeping back a little bit.
Right. Yeah. It's very, what was the orange juice lady? The horrible orange juice lady.
Oh yeah. Anita Bryant.
Yes. Anita Bryant. It's very Anita Bryant. One of the other things that I feel like that you're known for is your Bechdel test, which for people who don't know, I don't know, maybe you should just tell them what it is. I feel like you're the one who created it. So I feel like maybe you can explain it better than me.
Well, it's a funny metric. It's something that arose out of a comic strip I wrote many decades ago, back in 1985. I had a comic strip about two women trying to decide what movie they were going to see. And they're walking past all these theaters with these posters for like action movies, like Conan the Barbarian and stuff. And one woman says, okay, my rule for seeing a movie is it has to have at least two women in it who talk to each other about something besides a man. And that was just like this kind of, it wasn't actually my idea. I stole that from a friend of mine. I thought it was really smart. And, my friends enjoyed the comic strip fine. No one really thought much more about it until somehow it sort of got resurrected after the internet started up. And young film students, I think, started talking about it and making it into this real thing. It wasn't like I said, this is the Bechdel test. This was something that kind of spontaneously happened. And it became this way to measure how well a movie or a book or any, storytelling medium honored the subjectivity of its female characters. So it's just a simple little measurement.
Yeah. But it's like become such a huge part of the culture. I feel like we do a book club on the Stacks once a month. And a few months back, we did Song of Solomon. And actually someone brought up the Bechdel test about Song of Solomon because we were like, I don't think it would pass, even though it's the great Toni Morrison who writes like from such a feminist lens. And we all sort of had a good laugh about it. But it's also her novel that centers one of her novels that centers a male protagonist, and it's sort of his adventure story. And so it makes sense because he's like the center of the world. But it was just so funny that it came like that your Bechdel test came up in this context because it's also Song of Solomon is also argued as like one of the great, feminist novels or has a great feminist lens or however, you want to say it. But so I think it's just like such a pervasive little quick like gut check, if you will, for the culture. And it's sort of, your name has become now synonymous with this idea of like representation and women specifically and what that looks like. And I think like, again, to circle back a little bit to the banned books thing, again, it's that point of like, these books should exist because these people exist. Like women talk about other things besides men to each other, believe it or not. Surprise, surprise.
Yes.
Do you have a sense of like any places that people can go, or like organizations that are helping, or like actionable items that people can do?
I think of organizations like the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, who I'm actually going to send some money to today. I feel like
Fantastic.
I haven't properly recognized the work that they're doing, but I mean, that's one thing you can do.
Yeah,
those
no, that's
people do
great.
amazing work.
I think that's and that's an organization I wasn't familiar with. So thank you for sharing that.
One thing I think people can do also is to try not to oversimplify these things. I just read a really great article by a woman in Tennessee, a woman who lives in Tennessee and has been dealing with the mouse situation down there. And she feels frustrated by how all these people from the coast are chiming in to say how benighted the people of Tennessee are. But there's lots of people there advocating for these books. So I guess don't forget that. Don't forget how local all these things are. And those people can use support, people on the local fronts.
Yeah, that's such a good reminder too. It's like there's this idea that everything is national, and it's not anymore. It's not. We think it is because we have access to people nationally and in a way that we didn't used to, but still everything is local, mostly. I guess my sort of last question for you is, what's the thing that you wish more people understood about the banning of books, whether it's impact on you personally as a creator of books, a book that has been banned, or just like sort of bigger picture or anything really?
I just come back to something I said earlier, which is this instinct to somehow protect children is troubling. And it inevitably has the opposite effect. It's much better for people to talk about these difficult issues with their kids and try to prevent them from ever learning about them. I mean, come on. That's just basic.
What do we do though for kids who don't have those adults in their life?
Yeah, well, like I think that's probably most kids.
Right.
I know.
I think so.
Parents get busy. They don't have time to sit around figuring out how to discuss the Holocaust with their children.
Right.
Although,
or they believe it didn't happen, like some kids have parents that really suck, some kids have parents who are busy, and some kids have parents who think that you're an obscene human because you are gay, like I think that.
Yeah. The playing field has really shifted. I mean, it's so nuts now with people not even on the same playing field. People don't agree on what reality is anymore. So that makes it all much more fraught and dangerous.
Yeah. I feel like that is, for me, what makes the banning stuff even more upsetting is it's like, we don't want to ban the books because I think the books should exist, and I think they should be accessible for students and for people generally. And what compounds that is like so many of these kids are going to schools and school districts where they don't believe the book should exist. And that means that, a lot of their families might not believe that the book should exist. So even if they can find the book, how are they having access to these things? So many people are like, oh, it's the information age. People can find it, the internet. But it's like, you don't even know what to look for if you've never seen it and never heard of it.
Yeah.
So that's that's the part that really just like makes me feel angry and sad and frustrated, is like, okay, we as adults know, but if you're 15, how do you know what you don't know?
Right. I mean, that's the beauty of libraries and the way that we used to just actually explore a library and run across these things.
Right.
I know that's how I found so much interesting material as a young person.
Right. I mean, the library was like so important for me as a young person as well. But if it's not in the library, right? It's just like, when you think, like when I start to think about it as less of an abstract thing and more of an actual reality, it's very troubling.
It's all very disturbing, Tracy. Thank you for talking about it in this kind of depth this week.
Thank you for coming and talking with me and taking time from the other things you could and should be doing to talk about, the other crazy thing. It's like your book came out in 2006 and like we're still talking about it. But I did do a little research and it was one of the most challenged books in 2015, which is the year that the show opened on Broadway.
Oh,
so
wow.
I think that probably the reviving success of your work on Broadway and as a musical, I think probably or what did they call it, a musical, or do they call it a play with music?
It's a musical.
It's a musical.
Yeah.
Sometimes they make that weird distinction. I don't get it. Anyways, but I think probably like that reviving, which is also sort of an interesting dichotomy of like, you've written this thing, it becomes successful again, and then like the backlash comes again. But anyways, I did see that it was one of the most challenged books that year. But anyways, Alison, this has been so great. Thank you so much for your time and for talking and for being willing to talk about this stuff still.
You're so welcome, Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you again to Alison Bechdel. After this quick break, we will hear from Kelsey Reynolds, a high school teacher in New Orleans, about how she approaches her curriculum and difficult conversations with her students.
My name is Brandon Kyle Goodman, and my favorite banned book is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I read it at a time when I was trying to make sense of the chaos in pursuing my dream of acting and writing with all its ups, downs, and rejection. The Alchemist was so transformative as it gave me new perspective, grounding, and rejuvenated my hope, reminding me to listen to the whispers of my life and to hold onto my belief in myself and my pursuit. I count it as one of the most important books I've ever read.
This is Becca Tobin, podcast host, actress, and author. One of my favorite books of all time is The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls, and it was on a banned book list from 2012. It's a memoir about resilience. It's about a young girl who was raised in poverty among substance abuse and violence, and how she ultimately learned how to cope and survive.
Valentine's Day is upon us, and I've got love on the brain. Love for books, duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind-the-scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to tracythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. All right, everyone, I'm very excited. We are about to talk to Kelsey Reynolds. Kelsey is a Black queer educator, youth community organizer, abolitionist, and lifelong student who centers her relationship building and listening to youth in her teaching practice. She teaches English 4 at New Harmony High School in New Orleans. Kelsey, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk today.
I'm really excited to talk to you. First, let me just say, just casually as a blanket, thank you for being a teacher, especially during this pandemic and this nightmare that is going on. I know you're doing so much heavy lifting. So thank you not only for the work that you do, but also for taking time to talk with me about the nightmare that is banned books. I know a little bit about you. We have a mutual contact who told me you're the greatest teacher in the history of teaching and that you teach I think the quote was, "You teach our books with so much tender love and care." So I'm curious, sort of broadly, we'll start broadly. How are you feeling about this banned book stuff? What is it specifically that is bringing you concern or anxiety or stress or whatever it is? Will you just sort of talk broadly about that?
I think broadly, my actual initial feelings and thoughts are just that I'm not surprised,
Mm.
and I think that is also the scary part is almost this feeling of complacency in the sense of, or I don't know if complacency is the right word, but like, yeah, not surprised. Like, here we go again. And so much of my class is centering like, how do we build a world where more people are cared for and heard and seen? And I'm very lucky that I'm able to do that. And I'm able to teach, for example, heavy, which is now banned. I think that was the heaviest one for me. I was like, what? Y'all banned heavy? And I
Yeah.
just taught it. It was such a beautiful experience with my students. But in general, yeah, it's really just, it's disappointing, but it's not surprising. And it's going to continue to happen. And I think it's our job as educators, parents, friends, to keep teaching the books, keep reading the books, keep buying the books, keep talking about the books, right? I think it's really important that we continue to talk about it because it's going to be more frequent. And I think also what's important to note is I feel like it's coming after a lot of beautiful books are being written by Black and Brown people and
Mhm.
for Black and Brown students, right? We have
Mhm.
this, I don't know, there's so many beautiful books, so much beautiful literature for young adults right now. And I think that's also a key thing, right? It's like people are seeing that and people are seeing that kids want to read this work. They
Right.
want that, and then now the response is, okay, well, let's ban it. Let's get rid of it, right? And I think it's our jobs, even as librarians, of like, how do we skate around this and how do we, still actually teach it?
Right.
But yeah, it's this mixed feeling of incredible frustration, disappointment, and then also like, yeah, not surprised, but we're gonna keep on going. We're gonna keep on doing what we have to do. Yeah.
You teach English for that. What grade is that? What is that level? What does that mean? I don't know. I feel like every school has their own language around like grade or like content. Can you just tell us a little bit about what your class is? What your class is?
Yeah, so I teach English 4, which is basically teaching mostly seniors. I have a few juniors. I teach in high school, and I work at a school where I'm very lucky that I have a lot of curriculum freedom. So I'm not a teacher that has like a scripted curriculum that's handed to me. It's very much, they want us to teach what we want to teach. So I had a lot of freedom to dream, which was really beautiful and also really difficult. Like I
Yeah.
felt this incredible pressure, and it actually caused me a lot of anxiety. I think it makes me feel so wonderful to know that somebody like Kelsey Lehman was like, oh, yeah, I can tell she's teaching with so much tender love and care. And a lot of it, this is my first year teaching English 4. Last year, I taught outdoor adventures and health. But I spent the entire summer at a coffee shop. I spent the entire summer just like rereading all my favorite books. And basically, when I sat down to design my class, I had talked to a lot of the young people I worked with before. So I've worked at different education nonprofits. So I've worked with Upward Bound and then this organization 826 New Orleans, which is around creative writing. And I reached out to all of the high schoolers I worked with and was like, what would y'all want to learn? Like what would you want to read?
Mm.
And a big thing that kept coming up was relationships and love. And I was like, okay, how can I do this? And then I really sat with, well, what books have just changed my life? And the two were Heavy by Kelsey Lehman and then All About Love by Bell Hooks.
Mm.
And I kind of started sitting with this idea that like we're not taught how to love and care about each other.
Mhm.
And so I think in so much of my practice, I feel like I have a pedagogy of care and love. And so I was like, well, how can that actually be a part of the curriculum too? Right? How do we teach about care and love and these and how it's really difficult to do that under capitalism, right? And how it's really difficult to do that under systems of oppression and or systems of domination, I feel like, as Bell Hooks names. And yeah, so I sat down and was like, shoot, let me think about the books that I really love. Right now we're reading If Beale Street Could Talk, which is
Mm.
another really beautiful book
Mhm.
around love and hope. And And I kind of asked this broader question to my students of how do these big systems, right? Like, so for right now, it's how does the prison industrial complex affect the way that we treat each other and we treat ourselves, right? So how do these big systems affect our interpersonal relationships and make it hard to love, make it hard to care, right?
Right.
And then basically, like, how do we love each other in healthy ways? And yeah, our first unit with Heavy was so special. I will always remember that. And students were just super into answering these questions around love and healthy love. And then intergenerational trauma came up a lot. And how do we break these cycles?
When you're teaching these books, like especially a book like Heavy that's now been banned, I don't know if it was at the time that you read it, are you talking about like the banning part of the book? Like, are you saying like people are against this book because X, Y, and Z? Like, is that part of your conversation? Like the contextualizing of the book in the current moment, or are you more focused on just what's inside the writing, what's inside the book?
Yeah, in relationship to Heavy, it wasn't banned at the time, so that wasn't a conversation we were having. But I did, I have to be very intentional around these books, right? Like Heavy is heavy.
Right.
And also when when you're doing this work, right? When you're doing identity work, when you're talking about systems of oppression, I have a very diverse class. I have a very diverse group of kids, Black, white, majority Black and white. But in general, it can bring up a lot. And I learned a lot about that. Yeah, things didn't go well. Things went really amazing. Well, this is what I'll say. Actually, no, things did go well. And what I will say is I had white students who were very uncomfortable. And that was also okay. And I think that was something that I walked away from. It was like, oh, this was hard for you, and you're naming the fact that you don't want to go to this author talk because you're a white woman and you're not sure it's for you. And I'm like, oh wait, this is how Black kids always feel.
Right.
And so, and also though, it took a lot of relationship building with all my students so that at the end of the day, that student felt seen and was like, okay, I can see you just want to challenge me, and
Right.
and it's okay to be uncomfortable. But one thing I will say is I think especially with these books that are banned and just in general is you have to set up a community. I don't know. You have to do relationship building, and you cannot skip that part when you teach these books, right? I think the other thing I will say, the best feedback I got from students, especially during that unit, was just that they were so appreciative that I wasn't afraid to put these books with, like, I guess what people would consider adult content. I actually wish I could pull the quote. Maybe I can find it. I'll send it to you afterwards. But one of the students was just like, yeah, thank you for not trying to hide stuff from us. Like, we're 17, we're 18. Thank you for seeing us as humans and
Right.
as young adults, right? In so many ways, I think teachers are scared. And I got scared at one point. I was like, oh shit, like I have ruffled feathers and
Right.
I'm a little freaked out, but at the end of the day, like, so many of my students felt seen, including white students felt
Right.
seen and felt like, but I had to really create that, like, I don't know, buffer, I don't know, word, container. I had to create a container,
I
right? We
see.
had to do the community agreements. We had to do the work so that we could get through that discomfort. And I think even right now we're talking about prison abolition. And I was like, look, y'all, we're all going to be on different spectrums of things. And actually, like, the next week, some of my lessons are on conflict and, like, how do we move through conflict and for it to be generative. But you have to teach those skills, right?
Right.
And that's kind of the basis of my thing is like, well, how do we actually teach being in relationship to each other? I don't know that I have all the answers, but I'm trying.
Sure. None of us do. Please give yourself credit to not have the answers. So one of the things that you mentioned that I feel like I'm hearing constantly from the people who want to ban these books is that it makes students uncomfortable. I think that the missing word is white students, or straight students, or cis students, depending on the book. And I'm wondering, like, you said you kind of set up these boundaries and you set up these systems to talk about this stuff, but how do you deal with it in the moment, right? Like, I've been in classrooms where we're reading something. I can't think exactly because I'm old enough to not remember.
Mhm.
But, you know, like something will come up and the white boy in class will be like, well, how come he can say the N-word and I can't, or whatever. Something comes up that it's like a confrontational moment, or someone gets really uncomfortable and shuts down, or someone wants to leave the room because things were said that were insensitive. And anyways, how, as a teacher, are you combating those moments and turning them into, I don't know, teachable moments? Not to be too redundant by putting the definition in
Yeah.
but how are you handling the tenderness of your students as well as the tenderness of the texts that you're teaching? And how can other people sort of approach that work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So there's a narrative, I feel that, teachers are supposed to be neutral, which in a lot of ways, yes, right? Like we're supposed to hold and really facilitate, these conversations for the students to get to their own opinions. Absolutely. I am also not afraid to name very early on in my class that one, yes, this is a space where you can mess up,
Mhm.
right? Like I am here to be that container to hold you when you mess up. And also though, I'm not going to tolerate racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic stuff. I'm not going to be afraid to check you, and I'm also not I want my students to know that they can also do that. So what I will say is a lot of times in those moments, I turn to students and I ask the rest of the class, well, would anybody else like to respond to that? Right? Like, hey, there is this uncomfortable moment that's happening. I think another really big thing, so something I started this semester is I do these like mindfulness minutes after our do now, which can be anywhere from like a 3-minute meditation to like a 7-minute meditation, or we will listen to like Tibetan sound bowls. And a part of that was actually so that people we can start paying attention to our bodies, because right
Mm.
when those moments of like, oh, the conflict, we get really activated in our
Yeah.
bodies, and then right. And so that's been a big thing for us, and really for me even, is like, okay, let's center ourselves before we start talking about this, because again, we are going to have wildly different opinions, right? And I think though that's another big thing, is that that's okay, right? And also really creating a culture like it's okay to disagree. Now it's not okay to disagree if you're saying something like
Right.
against me as a Black person, right? Like no, or disagreeing on my rights, let's say. But it is okay for us to not agree, and it's okay for us to have these difficult conversations. Even I remember one of my classes, one of the community agreements was like, we want to be able to have healthy debate. They were like, we
Mm.
want to be able to debate. That's the other thing is, yes, we are going to have these uncomfortable moments, but for the most part, the students want it. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yes. That's what
Like,
I remember
it's
from school.
it's you want it. You
Yes.
want to have those engaging conversations. They don't want to be babied. Like
Right.
it's frustrating. It's very adultist of us to assume like students have the agency, young people have the agency. Quite frankly, young people are way smarter and can usually handle conflict a
Yes.
lot better.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
um,
And the hard topics too. Like I think about
yes.
this all the time when I hear people talking about like, oh, it makes young people uncomfortable. I just think like, no, when I was young, like I was like weirdly obsessed with the Holocaust,
Me
like
too.
just
Ah!
totally upset. Like and like I still am a person who still likes to read books about like mass death that is like organized. Like I don't like I'm not as interested in like a mass shooting as I am in something like Jonestown, right? Like because there was some sort of organization behind that, and I've always been interested in that, and I've always wanted to read about it. And quite frankly, in high school, I was annoyed that I had to read books about like I was annoyed that I had to read The Awakening because I was like, I am bored and I'm not
Yeah.
being challenged and I'm not learning anything because I really don't care what an alliteration is, truly, no matter what. And so,
Yeah.
like, it was like, okay, go off, Edna in The Awakening, like, do your thing. But I'm just not reading this. And like, for the opposite reasons, just like, I'm bored. And I wish when I was younger, in school, I was challenged because I think my parents did a good job of showing us stuff because I don't know how else I would have known about Jonestown because they certainly weren't teaching it in high school.
Yeah.
And I think people just don't give young people the credit for wanting to learn the real stuff, you know, and like about life stuff. And I think it's so interesting that your students, not surprising, but just interesting that your students were like, we want to learn about love and relationships. Because of course.
Of course.
Because
And
what
I
else
think
do you
that's
care about when you're 16, 17, 18, 20, 30,
exactly
50, 60,
yeah.
100? Like, it's all there is, love and relationships. Isn't that the whole thing?
Yeah, and we're not taught how to do it. And I think
No.
similarly, it's funny, when I was thinking about the banned books, I think one of the books that really got my attention, well, like The Hate You Give was one that got my attention because I loved reading that. And then was Mouse, actually, the comic book,
Yeah.
because I had a very similar, I was just talking to my friend about this. I'm like, I had this weird thing where like I loved reading, like I wanted to learn about the Holocaust and I wanted to learn about Night. And I remember we read Night and I was like, so yeah. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, I wanted that stuff. You know,
Yeah.
I remember my senior year, we had the choice of, I don't know, having an internship or taking this class, History of the Other. And I was like, yeah, I want to learn what is History of the Other. But, you know, in general, I wanted those difficult conversations. And I think the other thing is with social media and stuff, this is what students are consuming. And not only that, I think we also frame it around this idea of like, oh, well, we don't want students to like learn this stuff, but they are living it. Like,
Right.
I'm like, no, this is just life. Like, and
Right.
it's now, hey, maybe more of a mirror, or I don't know, but in general, like, students are loving, students are being in relationship to each other, students are exploring their identities. And if anything, like, why not create a safe container for them to do that in? Then this kind of like out of sight, out of mind, like maybe if we don't do it, they're not going to talk about it, which is,
Right. Or they're not going to learn about it, or they're not going
yeah.
to live through it. Okay, let me ask, this is the other part that I'm so curious about. Generally, how are parents involved with your curriculum? Are you getting feedback from parents? Are parents reading along with students? Are they engaging with the texts? Are they coming to you saying, you know, you made little Annie uncomfortable? Are they coming to you and saying, you know, little Annie's never been more engaged at dinner? Like, are you hearing from parents? Because that's the other piece that I'm just like, it can't all be on teachers and the school board and librarians. Like, your job is not to raise engaged citizens. Your job is to educate young people. So I'm curious, like, how much the parents in your classrooms are part of what you're doing or fighting it.
Yeah. In general, I would say teaching seniors, most parents are kind of like, you know, my
Yeah.
kid's old and they're not that that involved. What I will say though is, yeah, like my syllabus, I had to have parents sign it. I was very clear. And, you know, even before I, let's say, had the students read heavy, I gave like them the reading schedule on a bookmark, and there was a very clear trigger warning. Because if anything was heavy, more than like racial stuff, the things around sexual assault were very huge.
Yes.
And were very, you know, I had to make sure. And that's another thing. Students can always walk out, can always step out. We have, you know, if a mental health professional needs to come in, etc. But that was a big thing. And I will say, like, one of the incidents with heavy where like a student was uncomfortable, the mom was super dope. The mom was like, I love it. Like, I want you to challenge my child. And I remember actually during back to school night, some parents walked into my rooms and saw the chart paper, and you know, and they were just like, "Whoa, this is okay. These are some big terms on this chart paper, right?" It was around like racism and all kind. Who knows what was up on the board? We might have been talking about like harm and abuse, but in general, they're more like, "Oh, okay, like this is cool that you're doing this." I also had moments. Actually, wow, it was so special. Now that I think about it, one of my students, I remember, I received this text kind of like late in the evening, and it was just like, "Hey, Miss Kelsey, I want you to know I gave this book to my mom, and it's really started huge conversations in our family." And I think that is so much of what Heavy was trying to do, was like, how do we be in relationship and heal within our families? And also, I know some people were like, "Yeah, I gave this to my mom," and like, first 10 pages she was like, "I can't keep reading this, like this
Huh.
is so difficult." But I think more in a way of like, oh, like I need to do this work, we need to do this work, and not in a way of I'm mad that you're reading this in school, but I think a similar feeling of, yeah, thanks for putting this in text, and thank you for seeing my child and being able to, like, trusting them to be able to handle it, but then also just knowing and believing that, of course, they're 17 and 18. But it was hard. This book was hard. I had to give, I would tell students like, okay, skip these few pages if you don't want to read about
Right.
XYZ. And I think that's where like being able to teach this stuff with intention and care is huge. I also will say, I guess this doesn't have to do with parents and stuff, but I think sometimes I am seeing white teachers wanting to do better and then trying to teach certain books, but they don't have the experience. And then it's like they maybe don't make the best decision around reading a book out loud with the N word in it,
Right.
or whatever.
Right.
And so I think too, like, yeah, it just has to be done with really intention. And yes, telling parents we are doing this. Because I think also one that allows for like, hey, I'm willing to have this conversation with you beforehand. And also I'm willing to work with you if I do need to get a different book for your kid, which I did do with Heavy. I did find another memoir for some students, but it wasn't around the race stuff. It was around sexual assault and not wanting to be re-triggered.
Got it. Okay, we're running out of time, so I just have a few more questions for you. Though I feel like talk to you for many hours. I'm very, very in love with you. Okay, just like briefly, how many of your students ish are you feeling like are using the library at the school, are reliant on it for discovering new books and works? Is that something that you're seeing? Because I know a lot of the books that are being banned maybe aren't being taught in curriculum, but they're being like just removed from the library. Is that a big impact for your students? And obviously this doesn't go for every school in the country. So please, people who are listening, I'm not saying what Kelsey is about to say is indicative of your children's schools.
Yeah. Also, what I will say is, sadly, we don't have a library. So, yeah.
So how do your kids get books?
That's what a great question. So actually what our English department did this year is we reached out to the public library.
Got it.
And we had students sign up for, and actually it's funny, I need to pass out the library. We just got them last week and I need to pass them out. So we got public library cards for all the students. But also what I will say is I had a student come up to me last week, love her, a white student. And she just straight up was like, Miss Kelsey, I feel like I need to do better about reading about Black identity and I don't know, it's Black History Month. She was like, is there any way you could suggest some books? And I was like, oh, like, let's go look at I do have a very small classroom library. I was like, look, honestly, all of these books can fit that. And I gave her 4 to take home. And I was like, you can take it. Another thing, I had a student 2 weeks ago who she was like, Miss Kelsey, I got to tell you about this book, Metamorphosis. Have you heard of it? And I was like, no, I haven't heard of it, And yeah, she just basically was like, I really want it. And I was hoping you had it. And whatever, it was really cheap. And I ordered 2 copies and was like, here, I bought her one. But it's like all about capitalism and stuff. So like, this is where I'm saying, I'm like, students want this.
They want it.
And yes, I wish we had a library. I so greatly do. I could go on and on about the New Orleans public school system and school libraries.
We won't do that today, but I might have to make you come back to do it. Okay, for folks who are concerned about what's going on with the banning of the books, what can they do? What do you recommend they do to help?
No, I mean, I think there's a few big things. One, buy the books. Buy them, though, from local bookstores. Don't buy them from Amazon, please. And I think, donate them to libraries, right? Buy them for libraries to give them to them. I think another thing is as much as we need voices, right? Because people are very loud. The ones who want the books banned, they're loud. And so I think just as they're showing up, it's like we also need to show up to meetings. We also need to maybe even email teachers and like in support of the books, right? How do you actually make sure your voice is being heard? I would say those are very simple things
those are
to
great
do.
things.
And I think also, buy your kids the books.
Yeah.
You read the books, read them together. So
those are great things. Okay, here's my last question for you. I know this is going to be hard. You've already mentioned a few, but what is your favorite banned book?
I just have to say Heavy I know I'm like talking. Y'all, if you have not read Heavy by Casey Lehman, please do.
It's like the most talked about book on this podcast. Everyone who's listening to this show, who's listened to it more than like twice, has definitely heard us talk about how great the book is. It's the greatest.
Yeah, I think also I will say just as a student, Mouse. I think too, what I love about Mouse is it's accessible. That's a really other big thing is like having comic books in your classroom because students who maybe can't access certain texts can then access that. There's images. Also, I would say The Hate You Give, just because it's like, yeah, again, it's like, it feels like an accessible text that a lot of students can get. And also just in general, if your teachers out there, teach more young adult books. I think lots of times we're like, we have to teach these classic books written by these old white people that make students just like, oh, I can't. So yeah, The Hate You Give, but heavy.
Okay. Kelsey, thank you so much for being here. This was such a treat. Again, thank you for all the work you do. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And everyone else, we will see you in the stacks. Thank you all so much for listening, and thank you to today's guests for joining me. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe to The Stacks wherever you listen to your podcasts and join The Stacks Pack on Patreon at patreon.com/The Stacks. Remember that The Stacks book club pick for February is I Live a Life Like Yours by Jan Grew, and we will be discussing the book on the podcast on Wednesday, February 23rd with Tessa Miller. I want to say a huge, huge thank you to Kiese Lehman, Sam Pinkleton, Andrew Russell, Cree Miles, Joseph Papa, Taryn Roeder, and Jackson Musker for helping me make this week possible. I also want to say an even bigger thank you to our editor, Christian Duenas, for working quadruple time to make this week possible. Everything you heard in today's episode can be found in the link in the show notes. For more from The Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram and at The Stacks Pod _ on Twitter, and check out our website, thestackspodcast.com. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Takirajis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.